For some of you, this will be like a trip down memory lane where we used to just like see what's topping in Japan and then copy the list, and then turns out the list was great all along and just keep playing it. What's up, folks? Today we are taking a look at Hexaorb at long last as one of the standard decks that I didn't do a deck profile on during the D-BT01 meta, but now in D-BT02 the deck got some really cool support and actually got a very nice showing in a Japanese event called the BVFL, which is kind of like a circuit for standard, gets a lot of players. Usually the more kind of like usual, like typical stuff is topping, like Bruce and Bastion, and now like, you know, Lyrical Monasterio is out in Japan, so obviously it's changing. But literally during like the Monster Strike meta, which is like one of the collab sets, this deck, Hexaorb Sorceress, actually went 8-0, so in 5-0 in Swiss, and then it won top 8, and won top 4, and it won finals. And I was watching the gameplay of this deck, and I was like, damn, this is actually kind of good. So I threw it together, and then I, you know, took it to locals, played it a whole bunch, and, you know, started to see some of the weaknesses of it, but also saw some of the crazy strengths of it that I think we've been kind of sleeping on. And so today we're going to take a look at Hexaorb. This will be card for card the same list as Sueru, or Sueru, that's the name of the player who actually topped with the deck. Also, don't mind the Digimon playmat. I just got done playing the EU regionals, so it was like 375 players, and I got top 64. But I'm now once again kind of like exhausted from Digimon and just want to play Vanguard again. So as usual, let's start with the ride deck. And so the ride deck here is going to be all new cards that you haven't actually seen before in any other Keter showcases. So of course, starter, you can use whichever you want, but it's the same as always. If you go second and right over it, you draw. We have Tier Square Sorceress. The on-ride effect is when you ride Pentagleam over it, you can count as one to draw a card. Might not seem like much, but honestly, the extra draw does actually help to just like, you know, have more cards in hand to survive early game from some decks, and in general, just to draw into your pieces. Then Pentagleam, when rode upon by Hexaorb, lets you look at the top 3 cards of your deck and rearrange them in any order on top of your deck, which is a really strong skill because it essentially allows you to know what's coming for your next 3 cards, right? So you know how much you need to, like, you know, use skills to bot deck certain things, or if you want to use skills to draw certain things, or if it's like 3 triggers and you just want to call down some beaters and start swinging. And of course, Hexaorb Sorceress, we play as our main Vanguard, and so she has 2 skills. So the first one is, will work from turn 3 onwards. When you drive check a trigger, you can choose one of your rear guards and give it plus 10k until end of turn. So basically, when you check a trigger, obviously give plus 10k power from the trigger effect itself, but then she kind of like doubles it, right? She lets you give another volume of power, and therefore that is really good because you basically get so much power in just one turn, which is really strong, obviously. And then her second effect is, once per turn, if you persona road this turn, you can count +1, soul +1, reveal up to 1 critical or front trigger from your hand and put it on top of your deck, and she gets +1 drive. So it says up to, which means that you don't have to technically put something on top of your deck. You can choose to just like count +1, soul +1, and like get an extra drive. That's fine too. But obviously, if you're going for the kill, stacking a crit is really good and will generally deliver lethal pretty consistently, or at least get the majority of your opponent's you know, hand cards out of them. And as it is very Persona Ride reliant, there is no exception. We are running 3 more copies of Hexaorb for the Persona Ride. It's, you know, very self-explanatory. There are very few decks outside of like Baramagnus, I guess, that don't want to run, you know, max copies of the main grade 3. Then I do know this guy's pricey, but this is an important card because of its hit pressure and, you know, the fact that it can counter some matchups, and also the counter charge and soul charge, which is of course Fasado. So you cannot be chosen by your opponent's card effects, which is great against stuff like Prison. And when its attack hits anything, counter charge 1, soul charge 1. So of course, we counterblast a fair bit in this deck, and we also like to soul blast a lot in this deck too. So this guy literally gives us the 2 resources we need. He's just a staple in Keter. He's such a good generic card that, you know, his price tag, he could be a triple rare, right? He could be a triple rare, nobody would be surprised. He's just that good of a card. And so of course in Hexaorb is really important, especially because like you can stack crits on one column and then like not put them on the Fasado, and then your opponent will be like between a rock and a hard place in like which one they want to take or guard. So that's a big thing. And finally, 2 copies of Lepisto. So Lepisto is kind of like the, I guess, like the one card that makes 4 attacks in this deck, and there's some pretty cool ways you can use them, because the reason why this deck actually topped, and what I realized, is that this deck just, you know, your drive checks all the time. Like you basically just know at least the top card of your deck at all times going to the battle phase, and therefore it also like goes through the deck very quickly because you like, you know, always look at top, put it on top or bottom, you know, look at top, look at top, look at top. And so you also hit your over triggers a bit more consistently, which is also very nice. This girl with Nova Trigger on her is pretty interesting. So her skill is when you drive check a trigger unit, counterblast 2, stand her, and give her plus 5k. So 18k beater, but restanding, which is very nice. The scaling power is also very appreciated, but only 2 copies. It's just not really like, you don't need it outside of like the big push turn, so you don't really care about like having it in the earlier stages of the game. Then we play 3 more copies of the Ride Deck Grade 2 Hexaorb Sorceress, which is of course for her second effect, which says when she is called on rearguard circle, you can look at the top card of your deck, put it on top or bottom, and if you put it on the bottom, she gets +2. So you might be thinking, oh, that +2 doesn't really matter. It does actually, because especially on turn 2, if you're trying to push, you will have to, like, you know, 12 + 8 will give you 20, therefore you'll be able to ask for magic numbers, which is pretty good. And overall, it's just one of the cards that helps us stack our, you know, the top cards of our deck in order to hit triggers more consistently or find our persona rides and stuff like that. And of course, that is very, very important. And the whole point of this deck, honestly, it's like the majority of the deck functions to look at the top cards of the deck and or like, you know, dig through them basically. Another card that does that is of course Mr. Olwain. So Olwain, we do play at 4 copies, is very, very, very important. So what he does is 2 things. First, when he's placed on rearguard circle, if your Vanguard is Hexaorb Sorceress, you can Soul Blast 1 and look at the top 2 cards of your deck, choose the 2 from among them and put them on top of your deck in any order, and put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So you essentially get to look at top 2 and then choose if you want to put them on top or bottom, you know, like 1 on top, 1 on bottom, or both on bottom, etc, etc. But it's really good because it lets you just cycle through the deck really quickly. You can choose what you want to keep on top, you can choose like whether you want to draw into certain things or drive check into certain things, and it's really, really good. You can't use it early game. That's the only kind of problem, is that he needs your Vanguard to be Hexorb, so you can't call it on grade 2, so you know, be careful with that. And then the second skill is when you drive check a trigger, you can count +1 to gain 10k power. Now initially I thought the skill was kind of whatever, right? Just like count +1 for 10k, it's like, is it really that good? But that's basically an extra trigger that you're putting on him that can really make those attacks hard to be guarded, you know, at all stages of the game, whether it's the early push or if you're going, you know, for the kill turn. That extra 10k can really be quite handy. So if you have a bit of excess counterblast, you know, maybe your opponent let you hit with Fasado a couple times, it's a good little card. It really is a good little card, and I think this is one of the most important cards in terms of like supporting this deck, because this gives us another way to stack the top of the deck, which is really nice, right? We got Pentagleams on Ride, we have Pentagleam on Call, we have Olwain, and that's not all. We also have probably one of my favorite arts in Keter in general is Dieglass Sorceress. So Dieglass Sorceress, drawn by Fuzichoko. Whenever an art is by Fuzichoko, I'll always say it, one of my favorite illustrators. Her skill is pretty simple. When placed on rear from hand, has to be from hand, if your Vanguard is Hexaorb or Pentagleam, you can count +1 and discard 1, look at the top 2 cards of your deck and choose up to 2 unit cards from among them and call them to rearguard circles, and then you put the rest of the cards on top of your deck in any order. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, right, initially when you read this card, you're like, wow, count +1, discard 1 to call 2, that's really good. But also, you might just happen, you count +1, discard 1, and you see 2 crits on top. You don't want to be calling down those crits. Well, that's another way to actually look at the top cards of your deck. Like, yes, you are discarding, which does hurt, it is a minus, but if you saw like a double crit, or if you saw an over trigger from that, chances are that that will win you the game, or that will actually like sway the control of the game's tempo in your favor. So while yes, she's amazing in like being able to just like field 2 cards for you, which is of course super great, but at the same time she's also really good because she lets you look through the top cards of your deck. And I can't stress it enough, like it's so important that you cycle through the top cards of your deck as efficiently as possible. And if you watch the gameplay, I'll try to link it in the description, remind me if I don't, of this deck, you'll see that like the times when like Dieglass is used, it's like, yeah, it does field stuff sometimes. Like oftentimes you want to hit like the other cards that look at the top cards of your deck from this superior call, but you can also use the filter if you are that far ahead. So that's something you should keep in mind. And she's just an amazing support card, right? Count +1, discard 1 to, you know, just call 2 from the top is super nice. Now, of course, there will be times where we hit duds at the top of the deck, and there's stuff that we don't want to drive check, and we'd rather draw into it before we go into the drive check, or, you know, just in general, have a nice booster. And Painkiller Angel is still that role in the deck. Her skill is very simple. At the end of battle that she boosted, Soul Blast 1, retire her to draw a card. The retire is also really nice in this meta because, of course, Bruce wants to hit the back row, but she self-clears, so therefore there's no back row to hit. Another nice thing in this deck with grade 1s is that because of the nature of Hexaorb's skill, when your opponent gives you 2 to pass and you have a grade 1 behind, like let's say you attack with 21 and your opponent goes like, all right, 33, 2 to pass. What you do is you check 1 trigger, you give all effects to Vanguard, and then Hexaorb's effect can give 10k to one of your units, so you give it to the booster and you broke through the 2 to pass with 1 trigger, and therefore that is very important. So boosters are really important in this deck. Like, you know, we also run like 7 grade 2s that do want to be boosted with 8ks as well to make those magic numbers, so she's pretty important. The other card that they run as a 2 of, which I think this is where I have to explain the current meta in Japan a little bit. So obviously, like as in English, you know, it started out with Bruce and Bastion dominating everything, but then every single BVFL week, like Nirvana kept topping. Nirvana just kept topping, and kept coming up on top and being really, really popular. So obviously, decks like Prison became more popular because they could check it. You know what else? It became an option. Of course, it was more tier square Sorceress. So Sorceress, sorry, I pronounced that weird. So her effect is when you drive check a trigger, you can count almost one and choose an opponent's front or rear guard and put it on the bottom of their deck. So that's a really cool way of like disrupting your opponent. Yes, it is another counterblast, but at the same time, if you can choose their like Verena Urger, or like if they left up, I don't know, like a combo piece and Bruce, or you know, like annoying like a Perio Turquoise in Prison, like there's really good targets to like bot deck that I think in general she is pretty good at taking care of. So 2 extra copies is actually quite good, and she's a decent grade 1 at that. Then we have 4 Perfect Guards. This is very self-explanatory. Perfect Guards are good. There's no reason not to run them. So, you know, so you want to run these ones as well because they are the ones that you don't need to discard for if you have only 1 or less cards in hand, which is very nice. For triggers, of course, the over trigger is very important, and it needs to be this one, especially because the extra drive check ability is so good. Of course, as you can see, the additional effect lets your rear guards perform drive checks till end of turn. And it's so important because on like Lepisto, Fasado turns, like this is just such a cool combo play where like if you have it on top, you can attack with Hexaorb first, like apply the over trigger effect, and then like let's say like you have Lepisto who can attack, and then you check a crit from her, put all effects on herself, for example, and then use her own effect to restand her mid-battle, and then you finish that drive check and then she can attack again, right? So it's little things like that that make this over trigger even better in Hexaorb. We are running 3 of the 20k shield front triggers as well. I mean, it's just a good little you know, tanky shield, and at the same time, like if you really need to, you can stack it with Hexaorb, but generally, unless you have like double fronts stacked up at the top, I would just like not even stack anything on the top and just like let myself get the triple drive, because that is like, you know, just another +1 basically. And of course, the most important trigger of them all in this deck is the critical. So of course, we're not playing just 4, we are playing 8. So 8 crits, because you need to be checking them really, really frequently and consistently, and at the same time, like also stacking them with Hexaorb. And because of how much filtering you do in this deck, you can see them pretty, like I'd say pretty regularly. Like I would say you can see them quite regularly, and that is very, very nice. And finally, of course, no deck is complete without the 4 heal triggers, because heals are good. We're seeing some Lyrical Monasterio decks where they start, like the logic is like, I don't care about healing, I just want to hit with damage, so we play 15 crit, but the other nations don't have that possibility yet, so heals it is, and heals are still very great. Alright, now as usual, let's take a look at the right deck discards. I'll show you one of the combo plays, especially with the over trigger. I think it's quite cool to watch. And then we'll do a quick mulligan and then call it. So for the right deck discards, like excess grade 1s like Painkiller are definitely fine. Dieglass can kind of like go into this situation too. You only need them at specific points, and they generally have like some kind of costs that, like especially Painkiller isn't really like that much of an amazing unit. Like Dieglass is like far better in my opinion, but you know, this is definitely like a nice card you can discard for the right deck. Fasados, like extra Fasados, if you have too many, like he's a great pressure unit, but if you already have like 2 on the field, like obviously he's not doing much else. He's very hard for the opponent to check outside of like attacking into him, so for that reason he's fine if you have a few too many. Triggers, maybe not crits but or fronts, but heals are definitely fine to discard as well if you need to just go through it. I like to keep, like if I have more crits in my hand, I want to keep them for like Hexaorb skill and stuff like that, so I think that for that reason like heals are the most discardable trigger. And if you really have excess cards of stuff like Olwain that like give you that top deck search, you could discard them, but I also think like unless you really like star for cost, it's a very important card to be like checking the top stack. Overall, I think the right deck discard is pretty difficult in this deck, and you have to like really assess by situation a lot of times, like how much soul you have, how much of the top deck you know, and stuff like that, and then you adjust based on that information. All right, let's take a look at a bit of an example combo. This is what I kind of like just want to show off because it looks cool. And I saw this happen in game and I was like, whoa. So let's say, you know, we wrote Hexaorb and we use the top 3 to, you know, we look at the top 3 and this is a stack, right? Or like you like got to the over trigger and there's a stack, you just leave the over trigger on top there, right? So what you want to do in these situations is typically like you want to swing with Hexaorb first, right? You know, you kind of like try to force out the 2 to pass kind of shenanigans, so you want to have the booster behind. And you're going to swing, it's like, oh, over trigger, well, I knew that was there. Gonna draw 1, and of course, you know, also remove the over trigger and apply the bonus effect, so this is going to go out of the game. And then, you know, drive check 2, drive check 3. Okay, they're all blanks, but that's fine, right? We got an over trigger, we give power to like Lepisto or something. Or Fasado, like Fasado might be the one that they might want to guard more so. So let's say, like, you know, our opponent takes the damage, etc. So then we're going to attack with Lepisto. Now the overtrigger effect lets us, like, you know, check 2. So we're going to check, it's like, oh, critical. We're going to CB2, stand this. We still do the second check. All right, Fasado, cool. Great to know. So now you can like swing with this again, and it's like, oh, would you look at that? I can drive check twice again. It's like, even if you don't get any good cards, it's still really strong because of what you can do with this. Now we get a heal in the front, like all kinds of great stuff, right? And you know, you get this kind of hand just from basically, you know, checking an overtrigger essentially. That's like how much plus this deck can make out of it. But a lot of it really comes down to like how you like use the kill turn with the Lepisto. Like, it doesn't have to be the overtrigger, it can be just like crits and stuff that you see on top as well, and how you're gonna manipulate them. Obviously, if you see like crit on top, you're gonna want to like try to attack with the Lepisto first to like force out a bit of shield, or maybe like, you know, attack an interceptor. Then your opponent will know that you have a trigger on top usually, but that's fine, you know, they're not ready for the double crit or whatever you have on top of there. So that's like one example of a board. Most other times, like, your board building is basically going to be stuff that's like the combination of like the Olwain and stuff like Diaglass, right? So you're going to be just like calling out stuff, looking through stuff, like filtering, and basically just like trying to hit all your good stuff, right? That's basically what the deck wants to do. With that being said, let's take a look at an example Mulligan so you guys can see how this deck wants to work. All right, time for the little Mulligan and gameplay segment. Once again, make sure you check out the Gamers Dogma videos. They uploaded the one of the Swiss round, then the top 8, and I think the finals of the BVFL were this one, and it's a really cool way to like watch. Obviously, like you might think like, oh, the player's getting lucky all the time, but at the same time, like, they're also manipulating the deck a lot, so that's kind of how that, you know, reaches that state. But from playing this deck, there's also some weaknesses where like you definitely run out of pieces, especially if you use your die glasses very aggressively. So please do keep that in mind. All right, so this time yellow dice will be us, gray one will be opponents. Who's gonna go first? It's gonna be us. Very nice. All right, so let's draw our 5 and see what we get. Generally speaking, oh, this is actually a pretty good hand. Like, I want to keep the Persona right for sure. Like, that's a very important thing for this deck. Fasado here isn't super important, and I'd rather like hit him, and especially like against a lot of decks you can get away with early rushing, so I might even want to keep this now that we have the Persona right. Everything else I think we'll send back and draw the remaining 3. And hey, that's pretty good. We got a die glass, so we can actually like push out some extra cards onto the field later. So that's also very nice. All right, so give it a quick shuffle and let's just get into it. So we're going first, which is pretty nice. Depending on the matchup, you might want to like discard the tier square. Like, against some matchups it's very important, in some matchups it just doesn't really matter. So then you just ride up into the tier square and that's it, right? You just pass on it, you take a damage. Dude, we got a little pentagleam going on here. That's absolutely fine. We're gonna draw into a heal. That's okay. Here we're gonna have only 1 CB, so we're not gonna be able to use a die glass, but for the later turns that's going to be pretty important. So let's just drop a heal here. I think that's quite fine. Right into the pentagleam. Use a tier square to count loss 1 and draw 1 into another pentagleam, which is pretty good. Here you have the choice if you want to like filter more, if you want to just like kind of like push. If you want to really confirm damage, you can also like put down boosters and stuff early to kind of like force your opponent to actually like, you know, just take these attacks, because you're trying to push them a little bit, but not too much. So let's say we just attack, we get nothing, just an Olwain, so that's perfectly fine and dandy. I'm going to keep this booster around here, unless it's like Bruce or something, and like, but even then, it's too early for Bruce to pop off. So let's just say they attack into us, you know, especially because a lot of the people playing as this deck don't know what it does. If you want one of the content creators that plays this deck a lot, you should check out GGMrRogers on Twitch and on YouTube. He actually streams very often, and he does remote fights, and oftentimes is playing this deck, so you'll learn a lot from just watching him. So we healed there. Let's just say, I mean, again, we're going first. That was just like a grade 2 turn on our opponent's side, and of course our like first pop-off turn is pretty good. We have some very strong filter options in this hand, and like, honestly, I'm not even sure what I would want to discard at this point, right? We have some really good grade 2s, and I kind of want to use the die glass at the same time too, but we're going to confirm the top deck first. Let's go into Pentagleam, because again, we're going to be looking at the top 3 here from writing over the Pentagleam. So let's see what we got in here. We got a PG, an Olwain, and a front, and we have to put them all on top some way. I guess I don't really need the PG right now. Normally, like at this early stage, we're okay without it. So we put the 2 normal units on top, right? So here what you could do, right, because you know what these are, right? Like, maybe you don't want to like superior call the PG, but honestly, PGs are still good attackers, especially behind Vanguard. They're pretty good, or like behind like a Fasado. So what we can do is go into Diaglass here and CB1, and then basically discard, we can just discard an Olwain, right? Discard an Olwain and look at top 2, and then basically just call them out, right? We're going to call out the Olwain here, and call out the PG here. And now Olwain, when placed, we have a Vanguard that is Hexaorb. We can Soul Blast 1, look at the top 2. Oh, this is pretty good. We have a front trigger and a Persona ride. So here we can kind of think about which order we want them in. I'm pretty sure I do want to keep both of them on the top. So that's something that like I definitely should kind of like just like leave as it is. We could even be a bit cheeky and like just put the front like this on top, because we can give it the extra 10k power from Hexaorb. So it's kind of nice. So we swing with 21, and of course it's technically like it can go up to 41 from just a single trigger, which is a cool factor in this deck. We also have excess CB that we can use on this guy as well. So let's just say, you know, we attack, it's like, oh, front trigger, that's very nice, front row 10k. Let's say we use the grade 2 to give him extra 10k power just to push more damage, and then like give another 10k from the Hexaorb effect to the Aegismare, and then second check is the Hexaorb Persona Ride that we know. So Persona Rides, you know, obviously very good for this deck. We've been keeping that crit in here this whole time for that reason. So this would be then 26, and this would be like 38. So really good numbers for like swinging quite early. And obviously like here, like this grade 1 again, you can, depending on your matchup, you can use it early, you can use it for later, etc, etc. It depends if you want to keep the booster pressure on or not. So then let's say our opponent is going to clap back, you know, hit us with a crit, you know, or like a double crit even, like wow, no defensives. This is like where like obviously you start noticing like, yeah, the hand of this deck is a little bit shaky sometimes. And like you want to keep certain things, like we have 2 Persona Rides, and let's say we won't live more than one more turn, so let's discard one of them. So we're going to guard like this, and then I don't know, like intercept with this, and basically just like keep this hand, right? We need all these pieces to do stuff with, right? For next turn, so we're gonna go stand and draw into another crit, that's fine. We're gonna Persona Ride, which is also great, into Lepisto, that is really, really good. So that's a very important combo piece that you want to have at some point in these turns. First, I think we're going to use the Olwain here to actually like see what the top stack is going to be. So we're going to Soul Blast 1, look at top 2, it's a crit, and a crit. That is like literally the best case scenario. You just keep both of those on top. Hexorb effect, Kalmas 1, Soul Blast 1. You notice how much we Soul Blast, right? It's a lot. And then of course we're going to stack the critical trigger on top here, and so our opponent knows that it's up there. And basically now you can start swinging, right? This swing for 23, it's going to re-stand with a power boost. You can swing for 29 here even if you want to. And then of course the Hexorb swings with 31, but they know that there's a crit in there. So usually this will get PG'd. You're going to check the crit. Your opponent will know that you have CB2, you know, to use the Lepisto to re-stand. So we're going to do that, you know, distribute the power and crits as you wish. But if this got PG'd, you're going to, you know, put like a crit and the power here, and then, you know, you can go like this. Oh, that's another crit, you know, like stack them as you wish, and wow, would you look at that triple crit. Guild gaming, you know, we just out here partying, having a good time. And then if you want, and if it's time to get rid of the not the pentakill, the painkiller angel, you can draw 1A, look at that, into another beautiful Hexaorb Persona Ride. That's great. And then just basically bash with the remaining attacks. So that's an example of the mulligan and kind of like how the deck functions and how you should be using the top deck searches. I think it's a really fun deck, so you should definitely give this a try. And that's basically the deck. So once again, make sure you watch the gameplay. This is a list that topped, that we basically took, and I took into my own hands, and I wanted to kind of like share with the world. You know, I share a lot of this stuff on Twitter, and I tried to like, you know, spread the word through Twitter, but I know not a lot of my viewers, or not, maybe no, actually quite a lot, but not all of my viewers use Twitter and like actually check out the stuff that's posted on there. So I wanted to kind of like spread the word about this deck, and like it's actually really, really good. And in set 3, Hexaorb is looking to get some really nice support with a new order already, so there's a lot to be excited about in my opinion. But yeah, that's basically it. If you liked the video, do leave a like. If you're not subscribed yet, please do. It does help the channel a lot. And let me know your thoughts on the deck, and just in general about Hexaorb and what kind of decks you've been playing in standard or in other formats. I've been actually playing a lot of premium myself, planning some content as well thanks to Revival Selection. Also, if you want to pick up any of the cards shown in this video, you can do so on parkage.com and use discount code DifferentFight for 5% discount at checkout. Also, they do have a lot of bundles for premium collections, so you make sure to check that out as well if you're looking to beef up your premium decks. But other than that, that's going to be it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.